This is an off-the-cuff chat about The Wizard of Oz. I've put some Gris gameplay over the video, so feel free, if you do want to listen, you can just listen to it. But the gameplay seemed thematically relevant, restoring colour to the world, and initially being in black and white. Besides that, enjoy the discussion. I can remember when all the hype around Wicked first started, and it brought back so many memories for me of when I first saw The Wizard of Oz, when I was literally 4 or 5 years old, and even what led me to go and watch The Wizard of Oz. It was around the time of the DVD release, and one of the big moments I think for me, it was when I got Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase, which we still had on video. During the video, there's a trailer for The Wizard of Oz. The DVD release may have been for the anniversary or one of those, but seeing the trailer and having never seen anything like this before, I was interested to watch it. So I think my mum bought it because I somehow, verbally or not, I showed interest in the look of the film. So a little while later I had the DVD, and I can remember the first time I put the disc in, and that was one of the first DVDs we ever got. I've been asking myself recently, what did Wizard of Oz do, and what does it still do that resonates for so many children, adults all across the world? And considering it's a film that within the next 10 years will go in the public domain, it's something that is certified classic, and there's no question as to the influence the film has had on the industry overall, how it became a staple for Hollywood, how so many films that followed tried to replicate that formula but didn't quite succeed. I'm going to go through 4 key points. This is more of a spitball conversation I've come up with off the top of my head compared to some of the more essay structured videos I've done recently. So one of the first points I wanted to make was a timeless fairy tale with soul. What that means is beyond your Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, there's something in the way the film presents The Wizard of Oz, which was originally a book, that it doesn't just feel like a fairy tale replicated. It adds some spirit. It adds, for example, Dorothy. Dorothy in the film she's got spirit, she's got character, and not to say the original Dorothy in the book doesn't, but she's very much more of a typical damsel in distress type, even as a protagonist. There are so many times in the book where she is saved by Tin Man, Scarecrow, or the Cowardly Lion, one of the 3 really. And those moments still do happen in the film. Obviously not towards the time she kills the witch, because that's the point where she chucks the bucket of water over her, she dissolves, and Dorothy does that firsthand. I think the film makes Dorothy feel more independent in a way, and for a film of the time in the 1930s, it's quite an achievement to have a character who still presents that and can still make you smile. There's something oddly charming about that. It is obviously horrendous what Judy Garland had to go through during the whole shoot and getting to that performance, but you can't deny the passion and the art and the craft. This is something else I wanted to cover. The passion of the crew and the cast all around. The snow being asbestos and long-term having some consequence for the cast members. The original Tin Man actor had to go to hospital and he couldn't play the role in the end because the suit had, I think, damaged his organs somehow. I can't remember the exact details, but the dedication of all these people, despite not really knowing how far the project would go, it changed directors 4 or 5 times, and yet the crew and cast kept struggling on. They wanted to get this film to be the technical achievement that they knew it could be. The set design, the music, everything involved, even down to the script writing, which was very much drafted and redrafted over and over. The way it managed to all form together by the end and create something that to this day astounds people, that's a spectacle in itself, and speaks to the level of human achievement that is possible within cinema. I guess it's a bit like Whiplash. Even though many of the cast and crew had to go through those struggles, at the end of the day, the passion really showed on screen, and the achievement that the film was, and to this day is, demonstrates how much that commitment can go, how far along it can take you in making a passion project like this. Speaking of technology, that's an area that we can't really skip over. The Technicolor being introduced through The Wizard of Oz and it being used as part of the story at the time when Dorothy first lands in Oz from Kansas, the transition between her being inside the house after the tornado and the film being in black and white, and then as soon as she opens the door it switches to the Technicolor. And I don't care which generation you are or how old or how young you are, I think that scene in the film has a way of reflecting the changing times, the way you will see it as you grow older. There are things that you'll see that you won't quite be able to believe. I think for many, that scene in The Wizard of Oz is the first example of that experience, because it's one of those times you can really understand how someone in the 1930s saw that film and they saw that transition and said, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. I don't know how they've done this. And even though kids nowadays, including myself, I grew up on Shrek. Kids these days are Minions, I don't know. But they grew up on 3D CGI, which itself was a technological leap, for animation, for children's films. But to see the technological leap that Wizard of Oz achieved, and to understand the significance of that, even in a medium that we still know always is in colour and to us is very normal. The way the film embeds that transition as part of the plot is able to make that reveal equally as impactful as it would have been 100 years ago, nearly. So I think that's one aspect of The Wizard of Oz that really has preserved it over a long period of time. The change into Technicolor is something that is still to this day a marvel to observe, because it's astounding that someone not only thought to draft this film and make this whole story, but also to embed the new technology and to use it almost as a tech demo for what is possible with this new camera technology. And obviously films did follow suit going forward. There were so many films that then applied Technicolor in more unique and interesting ways, and until it became the norm, 20, 30 years later. I still saw many films in black and white that released after The Wizard of Oz. I think one issue that the industry, that the preservation of the industry faces, is that people will look at a black and white film and say, oh, I can't watch that, I can't deal with this. That's something that is very common, I would say, with the general audiences in the UK. I don't know about the US, but it's something I hear over and over. Whether someone is 20 years old or 60 years old, you will hear that statement from somebody in those age groups that black and white films, I can't deal with that. And I think it's just because people get used to that comfort. We get used to what's normal. In a way, that's why I think it is important that people who are younger do watch The Wizard of Oz, because even from that young age, when I was 4 or 5 years old, even from that point I could understand the importance of a film, whether it's black and white or in colour, doesn't matter. Because if it presents a story, if it presents something engaging, it can still be impactful. And my perception of that didn't stop either, because a couple of years later, when I was probably 7, 8, I then saw The Elephant Man on TV late one night, a film that is completely in black and white, and it genuinely had me in tears by the end. I may have been too young to watch that, but I'm glad I saw it when I did because of the message it had. So that's something that I feel bears significance and will always bear significance, is the preservation of films that did have different technology that were applied in different ways. You're seeing that now with 2D animation, how 2D animation is almost completely dead and buried now, where 3D CGI has taken over. But there'll always be people who go back and watch those classics. They'll go and watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They'll go and watch the Don Bluth films, Land Before Time, any one of those. There will always be a space for those in the medium, even if it's not children who grow up with them now. Their parents did. Maybe they'll show it to them one day. It's a circle that never really ends. I think The Wizard of Oz truly reflects that, in the fact that people still go back and watch it to this day, and even more so after Wicked released. People are now going back to The Wizard of Oz to compare between that film and the way that Universal took elements of The Wizard of Oz itself, and without treading on illegal ground, were able to tip the hat to that film while adapting a book that is based on the original novel in the first place. There are elements where they couldn't take. For example, the silver slippers in the original book. In the film, they're changed to red slippers to give off that Technicolor glow. And when I read the book and I heard silver slippers, I'm like, huh? I was genuinely surprised that the slippers aren't red, because that is just so iconic. And I think that just goes to show how iconic the film is. It hasn't replaced the book or any of the books that went forward, but in terms of having a fan base and a following, The Wizard of Oz film has certainly left its paw prints over the years, and that has stooped on as decades have gone by and centuries have gone on, even down to Return to Oz, which I always loved. I watched that a couple years later. Even though it has a darker spin, it's another film that is very much a technical achievement, and you can tell how that technology was applied going forward. A couple years before Burton, I think, but you see Return to Oz and films that followed it like Beetlejuice, and it's very clear how that technology was applied going forward. Stop motion is now an art form in itself. One of the Oscar-nominated films for animation was Wallace and Gromit, which didn't win this year, but I mean, I'm still glad Flo did, obviously. I want to shift back to the dedication of the cast and crew. Really more so to the cast. I feel I've given the crew a moment, and you can never give the crew enough credit, because a crew is an absurd degree of teams who never receive the praise that they truly deserve, and I don't think you ever can give them that, because set design, costumes, lighting, sound, VFX, it can go on and on. There is so much inflow during filmmaking that is impossible to cover within a couple of sentences. Stunts, that's the big one, always gets missed. Stunts, that's an area that people feel should have its own Oscar category, but even nearly 100 years after the Academy first started, it's still not a thing. With the cast, though, the way they're able to deliver their lines with such charm and still maintain the heart, I'm trying to think of who really stands out to me. I feel they all do in their own special way, but especially for me, the actor that plays the Cowardly Lion, and bearing in mind he is in a real lion pelt, which itself is pretty concerning, but to be able to hold that weight, sing like he does, and perform, unbelievable. I also really like the original Wizard of Oz, the actor in that film, who manages to find the sweet balance between being a con man but having a weird charm to him. That's strangely fascinating to see to this day, and I don't feel any actor who has played Oz since has been able to match that bar. That includes you, Jeff Goldblum. To Judy Garland, to be able to resonate in the way she did and give such expression, carry on through that role despite how she was treated, most of all, it's a massive achievement, but also a tragic story, which has also been adapted into a film. So the content never ends. There's always a flow of something that I suppose, in a sense, can be exploited. One element I never hear really acknowledged enough about The Wizard of Oz is the fact that the ending and the elements of the story that are changed, how in the original book, Dorothy doesn't meet the similar characters beforehand. She doesn't meet a man who is selling fortune telling, who is trying to sell to her that he is magic. And the same goes for the ranchers on her farm. They are all characters who eventually, become the Tin Man, who become the Cowardly Lion. To be able to connect the dots there and offer something that feels, it has that lucid dream hit to it. For the writing staff who came up with that idea, first of all, to have the idea and to embed it as part of the film is really well handled. But I also feel one of the scenes that is one of the most iconic and one of the most satirized to this day is the very last scene when Dorothy wakes up, the film is back to black and white, and you hear that line where she's saying, "And you were there, and you were there, and you were there." That was something incredibly original to embed the characters into the fantasy element. That's also something that I feel has been adapted and used since going forward. The lucid dream and the idea of Dorothy is escaping into this world, but there are elements of her own world that are merging into it. And whether you can match it up with Alice in Wonderland, with Peter Pan, so many stories like that, The Wizard of Oz is the first film that I ever saw that did so in such perfect execution. So all in all, I haven't even covered the songs, and that just proves how much the rest of this film. People ask sometimes, for a lot of musical fans, what is the appeal? It's cheesy, or it's over the top, it's overly expressive, but I think most musicals, especially of that time, go beyond looking for, I just want to watch a fun musical and tap along. That element is there, but some of them, and especially Wizard of Oz, is just a technical marvel to observe and to understand the significance for filmmakers at that point and going forward. What it had to offer, you could argue, hasn't been executed since, because there is just no bar you can set that matches up to what we went from black and white screens to completely in colour. And that transition, there are many transitions like it in not just film, but in TV and animation. What springs to mind is the Simpsons episode where, I think it's a Treehouse of Horror, where Homer goes to the 3D world and he's walking into the real world. That's a good example. but I don't think that has as much of a awe and spectacle to it as it does seeing Oz in colour for that first time. And like I say, that's something I feel every generation should experience, because it will resonate so much with you as you get older and you even more understand how important it is. I'm trying to think of a good metaphor really that could apply it in the same sense. I guess it's like when you first went from, at least for my generation, when you went from your flip phones to the smartphone. We're going to make some people cringe saying that, but it's true. That was a big snap of the fingers and a big change that had a lot of people gasping in awe, because it was just, the leap in technology was astounding, and the idea that such concepts were possible, unheard of. I may do more videos on The Wizard of Oz, or just general ramblings like this, because I just enjoy having the conversation, even if it's to myself. I enjoy the flow. I do want to do more on Wicked, but I might wait until closer for part 2 to come out. I've got a lot to say, but yeah, other than that, don't touch that dial now, we're just getting started.